We are this will be in Knob News and it will be on the Knob YouTube channel. So we're very excited. Um, I am going to go ahead and get started. People will just have to be late. Um, I would like to go ahead and introduce the incredible Maria Brady. If you don't know her, you are missing out. She is one of my favorite people. She's the multi-state navigator from the Dallas Office of Apprenticeship. Um, she's just marvelous. I can't say enough great things about her. Um, I have her biography in front of me. I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to let her start talking.
Okay.
Maria, take it
Okay.
away.
All right. I said in the workshop description, start your engine. So let's go. This has a lot of information, and I definitely want to have time for Q&A after. So this is from WIOA's perspective, and that's the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, a registered apprenticeship potpourri. So what are we going to be covering? Okay. So if you take a look at what's on the right-hand side of your screen, we're going to be talking about all of those things, grants, related instruction, ITAs, but all within the construct of registered apprenticeship. Now, everything that I'm going to be talking about is a part of our Registered Apprenticeship Academy, which I'm also going to be talking about. So more specifically, what are we going to be discussing? Let's talk about who cares? I mean, you're all very busy people, so why should you stick around? We're also going to talk about 3 primary buckets, and that's what I call, from the perspective of WIOA, registered apprenticeship is really 3 funding buckets, and we'll talk more about that. ETPLs is the eligible training provider list and the related instruction component. We're going to talk about contracting and the OJT component. We often call the OJT component OJL, or on the job learning, means the same thing. Of course, we need to talk about supportive services critical for registered apprenticeship, and face your fear of the CAR. That's the Credential Attainment Rate. We're going to talk about the WIFM, future focused, what's in it for me? And by me, I mean you. Okay. And then the Registered Apprenticeship Academy as a resource, a free online resource. One of the things I love about the Academy is that you get in and you get out. You know, you're very busy. Well, you could just take 15 minutes and look at a module. And then it's very important that you take steps to connect with the right folks. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So let's get started. Okay. And I wish I could move these faces. I did it. Okay. So now I can see. Okay. Registered apprenticeship. Why should you care? It is growing in terms of public awareness, finally. You know, I've been with the Office of Apprenticeship since 2014, so little over 10 years now, and I've seen a surge, which is awesome. And it's becoming not just more popular, but more acceptable. And what I mean by that is it's no longer just perceived as a second chance system. Registered apprenticeship is being recognized as a life-changing path and on-ramp to the middle class. And it can definitely change the trajectory of an entire family. If you don't believe me, just go to an apprentice graduation. Just remember to bring tissues. It is pretty amazing. And is this all about, well, let's do registered apprenticeship and go to heaven? No, I mean, maybe, but there is a strong business case for becoming or staying involved with registered apprenticeship. You know that for every $1 an employer invests in registered apprenticeship, they get roughly $1.47 back. For every public dollar we invest, we get roughly $28 back. That's pretty amazing for a return on investment. And also, not to mention that engagement with registered apprenticeship from the perspective of the workforce system is an expectation. At a minimum, we expect representation from registered apprenticeship programs on your state and local boards. So that's the low bar. Okay, so these are the three buckets that I talk about when we talk about registered apprenticeship. And WIOA, the workforce system, can support the two primary components of every registered apprenticeship program, in addition to supportive services. Let me unpack that a little bit. The primary component of every registered apprenticeship program is the OJT or OJL component. I don't care what you call it. And by the way, regulations are in the process of coming out sometime over the next several months. And I believe that it will be called OJT moving forward, more consistent with the statutory term under WIOA. But OJT is the primary component of every registered apprenticeship program because, first and foremost, registered apprenticeship is a job. Now, the related instruction, also called related technical instruction, related training instruction, so a lot of folks call it RTI. I call it related instruction because that's what's in the regulations. But notice the word related. In other words, it relates back to the on-the-job training. So the related instruction supports the on-the-job training component. And then supportive services become critical, not just for starting apprentices, but also apprentices that are further along in their journey, and also to support retention and completion. And based on our research, we see that transportation and childcare top the list in terms of why do apprentices often leave during their first year of their program. And that's often due to the lack of transportation and childcare. Okay, I'm going to take that second bucket first, the related instruction. And that, of course, points to the eligible training provider list, or the ETPL. The ETPL relates only to the related instruction component of a registered apprenticeship program, or RAP. It has nothing to do with the OJT component. Now, to be determined eligible, a training provider has to submit a lot of information on past performance, their training, they give their firstborn. I mean, that's what it looks like to some people. But there is one exception, and that exception is registered apprenticeship. So registered apprenticeship programs are automatically considered ETPs, or eligible training providers, and that's because of what it takes to register them. Now look at the last bullet on the slide. And it's important to be technically accurate, because technically speaking, it's the provider of the related instruction that's the eligible training provider. However, it is under the auspices, under the jurisdiction, if you will, of the registered apprenticeship program sponsor. And I'll say a little bit more about that. Okay, so the regulations require that the state workforce agency, reach out to every sponsor, and we hope it's with the assistance of the state director of apprenticeship, to give sponsors the opportunity to do what we call opt-in for placement. In other words, what that means in English is that states cannot automatically put registered apprenticeship programs on their statewide ETPL. That would be contrary to federal regulations. You have to give sponsors an opportunity to say yes. They have to be given the value proposition, quite frankly. And when they opt in, they're going to be asked to provide basically 5 pieces of information. Now, where do we get this? It is from Federal Policy Guidance, Training and Employment Guidance Letter, or TEGL 8-19. And the 5 pieces of information: the name and address of the sponsor, the occupation or occupations if there's more than one, and of course the related instruction provider and their location if it's different. And by the way, the sponsor could be the related instruction provider, but they don't have to be. the method of instruction and the length of instruction and the number of active apprentices. Let me say something about number 5, the number of active apprentices. When we register an apprenticeship program, doesn't matter what state, based on federal regulation, we basically give new programs up until a year to register their first apprentice. Now, of course, when we register an apprenticeship program, we want them to get going right away and register a cohort of apprentices the next day, but that doesn't always happen. Here's my point, that we allow, because it takes time to start up, what have you, we allow up to a year for programs to have their first apprentice. So when a state requires, for instance, a new program to have 5 active apprentices right from the get-go, and I've seen that in state policies, that's problematic. Now, those are the 5 pieces of information that are required by federal policy, but it makes sense in order to get paid that, for instance, you would ask for other information, and that's okay up to a point, like the employer identification number, so that they could get that ITA, that individual training account. So how does the rhetoric compare with reality? Well, if you can see the clip art on the right-hand side of the screen, you see a person jumping through a variety of hoops. That's kind of the reality. So program sponsors in America today, registered apprenticeship program sponsors, especially national programs, have lots of difficulty getting on statewide ETPLs because they're expected to jump through various hoops. They're expected to provide a lot more information in addition to those 5 pieces of information on the previous slide. You know, maybe they have to go through their state Department of Higher Education, or they have to be approved by the city council, or as I mentioned, they have to have a certain number of active apprentices. And I'm actually working with a national program right now, and I've been waiting close to 5 months to get them on a statewide ETPL. And that's me, you know, and I know this stuff, and I'm trying to get them on a state ETPL, and I'm having all these issues. Or maybe they have to apply to every local board in the state, which is a no-no, or get approved by a local board before being placed on that list, that statewide list. Also, and a common one, is that the occupation that is apprenticed is not considered to be in demand. Now, WIOA represents limited resources intended to have the maximum benefit for those with the greatest need. So we understand that training dollars, limited training dollars, you know, have to go toward in-demand occupations. But one of the things we say in federal policy, and I'll share a link shortly, is that we ask state workforce agencies to include in their eligible training provider policies a statement saying that if a registered apprenticeship program is taking applications, then they should automatically be considered in demand. So no further due diligence is required. Now, a lot of states have that provision, but a lot of states do not, and it is a missed opportunity in terms of the expansion of registered apprenticeship. Okay, let's do a timeout. Workforce funding. In order to be eligible to receive any type of funding, and I want to clarify that you have to be eligible. You have to be an eligible adult, dislocated worker, and or youth. Now, there's a reason why the timing of WIOA participation relative to entry into a registered apprenticeship program is important. And you'll see on the side of the slide, it says timing is everything. Typically speaking, and I have the qualifier there, in general, that's an important qualification, and I'll get back to it. An employed individual, like an apprentice, won't be eligible for WIOA Title I services because they're not going to meet the adult low-income priority, as an example. However, many states, and one of the states I work very closely with, have self-sufficiency thresholds. And in other words, and it could be a low wage state, so that apprentices, and when an apprentice first start, they could be earning only perhaps 50-55% of the journey worker wage. Well, that could be below the self-sufficiency threshold. So it's possible that they could be eligible for WIOA Title I. So I just wanted to make that point. But generally speaking, you have to be careful of the timing. And when you're dealing with the timing, what's the critical factor there? Communication. That's the hardest thing in the world. Communication between the Registered Apprenticeship Program and the WIOA folks, the WIOA case managers. Okay, let's talk about the primary component of every registered apprenticeship program, the on-the-job training or on-the-job learning component. There we're talking about contracts. You can contract for one apprentice. You can contract for more, what we call bulk contracting. There's incumbent worker training contracts and customized training contracts. The difference is customized training contracts are for new recruits, or can be for new recruits. And in terms of incumbent worker training contracts, there is a stipulation in the WIOA statute that says you could spend up to 20% of your adult and dislocated worker allocation, the local board can, on incumbent worker training. Okay, now a couple of things before I get to the cohort bullet there. OJT is defined in WIOA at section 3, which is the definition section, and I want to say 44. It's also described in the regulations, and I want to clarify that OJT can be in the public sector, the private sector, or nonprofit. And I believe where that is stated unequivocally in the regs is at 680.700. Okay, now training cohorts. Anytime you have a cohort, you can use a contract. So you can have a cohort to support a contract for a cohort to support the on-the-job training component, or, and it's in italics there, the related instruction component. In other words, there is one time and one time only that you don't use an ITA to support the related instruction component of a registered apprenticeship program for an individual. And that is if you are funding the related instruction for a cohort, but then forget about the ETPL, doesn't matter. You finance it with a contract. That's pretty important. And where does it say that you can do that? It actually says that in the WIOA statute. You just have to read very carefully. But where we set it for the first time in federal policy is TEGL 13-16. So that's the only time ITAs don't need to support the related instruction component. Now you're going to get a copy of these slides, and I want to point out that there is a module in the Registered Apprenticeship Academy on contracting. Please check it out. It's only, I think, about 12 minutes long. So when we talk about WIOA workforce funding and contracting for cohorts, it may be a little hard to wrap your brain around it. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you see like a class. So that's related instruction, classroom training, for instance, although it's not always done in a classroom, it could be virtual. But that's a cohort for related instruction, as an example. And on the right, there's an on-the-job learning cohort, an example. So again, contracting for cohorts. Supportive services. not just important for participation because that starting wage for an apprentice is often lower, but it is really important for retention to help them stay in their program and completion. And more of our apprenticeship grants are recognizing the importance of supportive services. I think the last funding opportunity announcement we had for an OA managed grant was up to 20% of the grant funds could be utilized for supportive services. And that's huge. And again, I mentioned earlier childcare and transportation. Those are just examples of supportive services, but they usually top the list, especially childcare. Now, I want to give the example why this is so critical. And this is dated information. I'm going back many years, but I remember working with the IBEW in Tulsa, Oklahoma, many years ago. And what they were looking for was supportive services for their incoming apprentices, electrical apprentices, because the tools that they had to come in with, in other words, you had to come your first day with these tools and these boots. They were about $1,000. Now, that's a lot of money. It might as well be $1 million to these folks. Okay. So it is absolutely critical, not just for, to start, but to stay and to complete. Now, I always like to point folks to where does it say that? Because we deal with a lot of myths. And I've heard things like, oh, the federal regulations say you can't give an ITA and pay for the OJT at the same time. You can only do one or the other. I don't know where that comes from, but I've heard it from more than one individual and in different parts of the country. So here is TEGL, or Training and Employment Guidance Letter 19-16. And the link is on the slide. And look at the bullets. An ITA may be developed to receive registered apprenticeship training. Yep. An OJT contract. Yep. A combination of an ITA to cover classroom training along with an OJT contract, and even incumbent worker training for upskilling. Now, I want to highlight the last paragraph there. You can use WIOA funds to help with supportive services, but you can't only provide the supportive services. They have to be in conjunction with other career and training services. So be careful about that. Standalone supportive services are problematic. Okay, this is the same slide, or similar to the same slide you saw earlier, except that it has all of the verbiage on the bottom. This is the summary slide. So the workforce system can support the two primary components and supportive services. For OJT, you use a contract, can cover one, multiple apprentices, and wages are a proxy for the extraordinary costs of training the apprentice and the extra supervision. So we use wages as a proxy, and we typically max out at 50%. The RTI, or the related instruction, is through ITAs unless it's a contract for a cohort. And then supportive services. And if you have an ITA, you can also use those funds to provide supportive services. So that's your summary slide. Okay, quickly. These are the WIOA performance indicators. Now, the first four are a slam dunk. Employment in the second quarter after exit, in the fourth quarter after exit, median earnings in the second quarter, and measurable skill gains. So those are easily attainable through registered apprenticeship. But what's up with number 5, the credential attainment rate? I mean, especially, why would there be an issue with that? Because the certificate of completion of a registered apprenticeship program is a recognized post-secondary credential under WIOA. So what's up with that? First off, what is it? The CAR. First off, it seeks to ascertain for those who receive training, that's your denominator, those who receive training, the percentage who received a post-secondary credential, a recognized post-secondary credential, like our certificate of completion, you can either get it during WIOA participation or within a year of exit. And again, I've said WIOA represents limited resources intended to have the maximum benefit for those with the greatest need. Therefore, if we're spending limited federal dollars on training, we have an expectation of a credential. So what's the issue? For longer term registered apprenticeship programs, the time until the outcome is often too long to take credit for the positive outcome. So let's say we have an individual, WIOA funds are going to support an adult Title I participant. They become a registered apprentice. Notice the timing there, WIOA first, apprentice second, because that's when they're working. It's a 3-year wrap. WIOA funds are going to support the first 6 months of OJT at 50%. And then the individual's going to exit because WIOA is done. I know that it's, at least for me, I'm very visual, and I have a visual on the next slide, but bear with me. Although the individual has up until a year after they exit from WIOA to obtain that certificate of completion, it's not enough time. Now, this hurts the building trades in particular. Our building trades that have programs in excess of 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And please don't poo-poo the building trades, because these are family sustaining careers. And if you ever called a plumber on a Sunday, you know that it is definitely wages that are worth it. Let me show you a visual. Okay, I gotta move the faces out of the way. Oh. All right, so let's say WIOA participation is in October, last month, happened last month. The individual becomes an apprentice this month, November 2024, in a 3-year registered apprenticeship program, and WIOA is going to cover the first 6 months of OJT from November through May of 25. Now, May of 25, they're done. So they exit roughly the next month in June. Now, the end of the time frame to get that recognized post-secondary credential would be June of 2026, a year after exit. However, that certificate of completion for the 3-year wrap is not forthcoming until November of 2027. So it is a negative outcome for the credential attainment rate. Now think about it. One-stop operators function, right, by contract. They have a contract with the Workforce Development Board. They are not going to invest in something that's going to hurt them from getting their next contract. So they are less likely to support a longer-term registered apprenticeship program because it's going to hurt their performance and maybe their future contract. Now, this, however, there is such a thing as interim credentials or other industry recognized credentials. And I want to highlight, and it's on the right-hand side of your slide, the WIOA credential attainment rate and longer-term wraps is a short module in our Registered Apprenticeship Academy. Okay, so you can go there and get additional information. Okay, again, the WIFM, what's in it for me? And as I said, by me, I mean you. Because whatever is coming ahead in terms of workforce development, WIOA reauthorization, something different, registered apprenticeship is going to have a big role to play. Why? Because, again, as I said earlier, it makes complete business sense, and the return on investment is striking. It is an answer to a lot of our recruitment challenges, and it will help prepare a workforce that includes a workforce to support the infrastructure in this country. Now, let me take a couple of minutes to talk about the Registered Apprenticeship Academy, and then shortly we'll be able to open it up for questions. I did want to have a lot of time to entertain questions. When you go to the national website, www.apprenticeship.gov, the RA Academy is a tab on the right-hand side of the screen. Now, our administrator, John Ladd, describes the academy at the bottom of this slide. It's designed to cater to all the registered apprenticeship program stakeholders, playing a vital role in the success of the RA system. Okay. Now, when you click on that link, there are a series of catalogs. Now, you don't necessarily have to go through all the catalogs because you may not know which one to go in for what you're looking for. But there is a button you can search through all of the training we have with keywords like ETPL or contracting or supportive services, for instance. Okay. So here are some resources. Registered Apprenticeship Program Overview. A lot of the Academy modules are on YouTube. And as I mentioned, they're short. You get in, you get out. The Registered Apprenticeship Program Overview that talks about the different types of programs, the different types of on-the-job training, related instruction, things like that. That one is a little bit longer. Funding registered apprenticeship is a very good video. I think actually I narrated that one. That's right. Okay. Yes, it's a very good video. It's about 15 minutes long. Then the ETPL, so there is something from the sponsor's perspective, but it's a very good video. I think I did that one too. TEGL 819, there's the link. And then I mentioned TEGL 819 Change 1. Now, TEGL 819 is for the workforce system. It's eligible training providers. And we, namely Registered Apprenticeship, is on attachment 4. And we have those 5 data points that we have to collect. 819 Change 1 is all about registered apprenticeship. That's the only thing that it's about. And it addresses 5 issues that we've been seeing, which we're still seeing across the system, even though that was published in 2019, including the recommendation that states have as part of their ETPL policies a provision that if you're taking applications, you're automatically considered in demand. No further due diligence is required at the local board or one-stop operator level. Contracting to support registered apprenticeship. There is that YouTube video, as I mentioned, but I want to highlight TEGL, Training and Employment Guidance Letter 21-22, just published several months ago. Now, the title is misleading. Increasing equitable service access and employment outcomes for all job seekers, yada, yada. Sounds wonderful, but what I wish this was entitled was contracting, the importance of contracting and how do you do it. That's what I wish it was called. So please check it out. Now, in terms of financing cohorts, that, as I mentioned, was first mentioned in TEGL 13-16, but it's also in that recent guidance 21-22. Now, there is the YouTube video for the credential attainment rate and longer term wraps. And I think I use the example, because I do that one too, of a plumber. And it's actually a plumbing program in the great state of Louisiana where they utilize interim credentials that can help the workforce system support them. So it's a beautiful thing. And again, what does it take? Communication. Now, supportive services, we are expecting a module in the RA Academy. But in the meantime, I don't know if you're aware of Training and Employment Notice, or TEN 12-21, all these numbers, 21-22, 12 I mean, it's crazy, right? But it's there. Practitioner's Guide to Supportive Services. It's a very nice piece of work, and there's lots of resources and where to go for more information. Now, you need to stay connected, get connected, stay connected. When you go to our website, the tab for About Us, you scroll down and there's the map. You click on your state and it will give you the contact information for the State Director of Apprenticeship. So you may want to connect with the State Director of Apprenticeship. And again, at our national website, apprenticeship.gov, you can find out information on current grantees, current grants, and also new funding opportunities that are coming out. And there's lots of funds out there to support the expansion of registered apprenticeship, and not just with the Department of Labor. Okay, so I finished at about the right time so that I can open it up to questions. Connie, can I stop sharing?
We have lots of questions for you, Miss Maria.
Okay, so is it okay if I click stop share?
Yes, ma'am.
Because
Our
then maybe I
first,
can see.
yep,
I'm
our
sorry.
first question. Does it always have to be WIOA funding, or can you use braided funding based on local needs?
Yes, absolutely. But this webinar was specifically about WIOA funds. In fact, actually, let's ask Connie and let's ask her publicly. Maybe we could do a session on braiding funds. And what I like to do when I talk about braided funds and using, and you could braid WIOA funds, WIOA Title I, WIOA Title II, WIOA Title IV. You know, we could use a case study and talk about why we would use those braided funds, and also grant funds. So we could do that. So the answer is yes. Thank you for asking.
Miss Hiller, do you think we could arrange to do a session with Maria about braided funding and register apprenticeship?
Absolutely. Yes.
Awesome.
We will get that on the schedule for you guys.
Okay, and I'm gonna have a partner in crime. His name is Jeff Smith. We're gonna partner and we're gonna knock your socks off. But anyway,
We'll get this scheduled for you guys
okay,
in
yeah.
the coming months. Next question. I apologize, my voice is cracking. If it is a cohort contract, does the individual still need to qualify? This is a multi-part
Yes.
question.
Yes, yes.
And if it is a short contract, would an eligible individual still qualify for separate services, i.e., contract covers RI and individual qualifies employer for OJT reimbursement?
I'm not sure I understand. Is the question there, can you have a contract to support both the related instruction and the OJL together? Is that what the question is?
Robin,
I'm
will you
here.
unmute?
I'm here, and I'm sorry, I'm working with a phone, so it's hard to get my question typed. So I was just trying to understand if there's a cohort contract, can the individual also be eligible for additional services, or all the services based
Yes.
off? Okay. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. It's just that for WIOA to fund the on-the-job learning or on-the-job training, it has to be via contract.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
Another question we have is, can we use stackable credentials?
Yes, absolutely. I love stackable credentials. And that was part of, when you look at that YouTube video, the credential attainment rate and longer term wraps, using stackable credentials, that's an example of what I mean by an interim credential. Interim meaning, Webster's dictionary in the middle, before you get to the certificate of completion. Because really what the workforce board needs is that recognized post-secondary credential, which is defined at section 352 in WIOA.
So Maria, this is Susan. That was my question. I just want to clarify a little bit more. So with that construction example that you gave us, they wouldn't have the certificate of completion until the 3-year mark because it's such a long training. But
Yes.
before they exited, they could get a stackable credential.
Yes.
And use that for performance.
Yes.
So that's a win-win.
Now,
okay.
Oh, no, it's a beautiful thing, and people don't use it because they don't know. Now, just remember, you got to be careful because it has to be specific, measurable technical skills. Not,
Absolutely.
Yes, it's not like you warmed a seat for 3 hours or something.
Right.
Like
No, I think that it goes in conjunction with the stackable credentials. And the construction example was perfect.
Okay,
Thank you, Maria.
Check out that little video. And Susan, if you have any questions, just holler.
You know I will.
Yes.
6 a.m., right, Maria?
Yep.
You guys, I send her a message at 6 a.m. Eastern time, and she's getting back to me at 6:30 in the morning. I'm like, wow.
I know. She's a machine, isn't she? She's a
She is. What would we do without her?
I know. I would cry.
Stop it. You're hurting me here.
All right. Maria, does DOL have fact sheets or desk guides highlighting how WIOA may support RAPs?
Yes. Okay. I'm writing it down because there's actually a few. There's a desk guide, and it's right behind me, for registered apprenticeship and WIOA. So can I send that to you, Connie? And there's also there's a few of them. Let me send you. It's a desk, and it's what the hell? Oh, this is so uncouth. I'm not supposed to move over there, but it's so close. All right, but I'll send it to you. Okay.
Okay. Send it to me and we will get it out to all of you all that have registered for this session. As long as I have your email, we'll get it out to you guys. How's that sound?
And there's one on incumbent worker training that I'm also going to send you because it actually supports what we're talking about here. So thank you for the question.
And do you have a concise list of all the TEGLS you mentioned? We are sending out Maria's PowerPoint, guys, so you will get a list of all of the stuff she referenced today. Another question was a cohort contract die. Just to reconfirm, a cohort contract dies does not preclude the individual from having to be all WIA eligible?
No, they have to be. Yes. Yeah, they have to be. I mean, to get any funding, let me clarify that if I didn't. On one of my slides, it said, remember, to get funding, you have to be eligible as an adult dislocated worker or youth. It's just that if you have a cohort, a class of individuals who are eligible, that it's more administratively expedient to do a cohort contract than an individual OJT contract for 12 people. Especially because what is the training plan? And I know nobody asked about this yet. What's the training plan? Aren't you supposed to attach an individual training plan? Well, the training plan in a registered apprenticeship program is the Appendix A, and everybody's following the Appendix A. That's your training plan. So you have a list of the individuals who are eligible. It's attached to the cohort contract. I mean, it could be beautiful.
So Maria, with that example, what if I wasn't eligible for WIOA funding, but I was eligible for want to or a work grant or something like that? I could still be part of that specific cohort. My funding would just be different, right?
Well, but you wouldn't be part of that WIOA contract because this is a contract for WIOA funds, right?
So would that be a separate contract for me so that I could still be part of that cohort?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't know WANTO rules, but typically, for OJT, you know, with DOL funding, you need a contract. So,
Okay,
but
I
you
see.
can't, it's not like you could mush. It's like the difference between braiding and blending. Braiding is okay. Blending is not okay.
Yeah, I think that braided funding workshop will be great.
Yes.
Maria, we have another question. We have a public school that has a teacher apprenticeship through our local community college. Could they qualify for incumbent worker training funding?
Yes. Yes. Now, keep in and actually let me say more about that, because a lot of folks are nervous about using OJT funds to support teacher registered apprenticeship programs. And I think it would be very helpful if there was something that really, a desk gate or something that clarified how to do that. I mean, I think we now have up to 40 states that have teacher registered apprenticeship programs. And this is a question, you know, who do you pay? You know, how do you do the reimbursement? And again, we use the wages of the teacher apprentice as a proxy for the extraordinary cost of training them, and who would get those OJT funds? The school district. You know, so I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you could do that, but yes.
Lynn, Maria is right there in your backyard. Lynn is Workforce Solutions Greater Dallas. So,
Oh, wow. Yeah. You know, we've talked before, so let's talk again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I've got lots of questions with this, and I think my Dallas College folks were going to join us on this call, because we're all looking for different ways to help to support, like Richardson ISD and others that are doing the teacher apprenticeship.
I live in Richardson ISD, so I will definitely help you. We can work together.
Thank you.
any more questions? Oh, Robin, just ask. We're informal here. You guys know Maria. Just
I
ask.
appreciate it. So I just wanted to clarify, so when you're saying like a cohort contract, the actual RAP cohort can be mixed eligibility. It's just that the cohort contract will only cover the eligible individuals.
Your contract is only going to be for those WIOA eligible individuals. So whatever, is that what you're asking? I want to
It
make sure.
is. So the sponsor doesn't have to make like a cohort that's specific only to those individuals. It can still be a mixed eligibility cohort, just some of them will fall under the WIOA contract.
Yes,
Okay.
I see. And then,
Okay.
the others are funded in some other way. Yes,
Yeah.
because not everyone is going to be WIOA eligible. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying. You know, it's when you start thinking about it in reality, in practical terms, then you have all these questions. That's why I wanted to have this time.
Thank you.
Sure. That can't be it. I don't believe it.
Come on, you guys. Surely you've got some more questions for Maria. Maria, what do you do if you are having trouble getting a hold of your state apprenticeship coordinator?
Okay, when you say state apprenticeship coordinator, do you mean the state director?
Yeah, your state director.
Okay. One of the things I would recommend is to connect with my counterpart. What I mean by that is I'm a multi-state navigator. There are 6 of us, one for each of the DOL regions. I happen to be in region 4. Now you can find who are the navigators. You can go to our website about us and check it out. But say, you know, look, I've been trying to reach the state director of X and to no avail. Now you could also, I mean, if you click on the About Us, it'll give you information for the regional director. In other words, there are 6 regions, there are 6 regional directors. Reach out to the regional director and say, this person is not getting back to me, or did they retire, or are they on vacation, or what have you. Also the deputy regional director. So use the website. Don't not don't let the lack of response stop you from moving forward with registered apprenticeship. And in a worst case scenario, call me. Restate blending and braiding funds. Yes. All right. Picture a braid. Okay. You're braiding. You can still see if it's a threesome, you can still see the 3 separate strands. When you're blending, you can't, they lose their identity. And that's the important thing, because then they're losing their funding identity, and the association, what is it named? Association of Government Accountants. And I actually have a publication. I'm writing it down. But the Association of Government Accountants talk about blending and braiding and say braiding is okay, but blending you don't want to do with federal funds, because you have to be able to trace the last dollar. Does that help? I don't know because I can't tell.
Robin has another question.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm a question person.
Okay.
So first, what you just said, the braid, not blend, that was really helpful. And I think it'll make more sense when you do that future webinar we're all excited about. Then, oh my goodness. Oh, I was just going to throw something out there for difficulties reaching a state apprenticeship director. I know that for our state, an SAA state, we also have, the information on the website, and that a lot of times will go to a general contact. And I hear state director mentioned a lot, but the ATRs a lot of times are a good way to connect with the state director.
Oh, yes. Yes. It's just that it's hard to, how do you get to an ATR? They're not all listed on our website. So I wanted to give you something that's there. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you get in touch with the state director and they're going to put you in touch with their ATRs, their apprenticeship training representatives. It's like the difference between, well, you could go to the doctor, but sometimes the nurse really knows everything, kind of thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Did I just put my foot in my mouth? Okay, thank you.
No. We have about 5 minutes left. Does anybody else have any questions for Maria? Going once?
Maria and Robin again. Do you, are there webinars that are specific for potential sponsors and existing sponsors that maybe we could connect them with?
Yes. Thank you for asking. At the Academy, one of the catalogs, and you could always reach out to me and I'll be more specific. One of the catalogs is specifically for sponsors. So, and by the way, some of the modules are repeated in different catalogs. So if you think, oh no, which catalog is it? Again, you could always just go to the training, and go to, the search. But the sponsor catalog is very good.
This has been super helpful. I think that a lot of times there's a fear in discussing WIOA because it's very complex, and people are fearful that it will sound like we're over-promising, but it's such an important tool when we're having these conversations to build programs. So I appreciate the time you're spending on this.
No, I appreciate you asking. And it's very complicated. And, the devil's in the details. And it's one thing to talk about it at a high level, but the folks on the ground that are doing this, they don't want to get in trouble and they want to do the right thing. So you got to provide the details and examples and scenarios. That's why when I talk about braided funding, you got to talk about it from the perspective of an individual and then maybe a group of individuals. But definitely, and by the way, you focus, here I am like a talking head, right? I'm a Fed. But, really what you got to do is you don't focus on the state or the feds behind you, right? You focus on the customer in front of you. Okay, it's always about the customer. What do they need? And then bring to bear all of the resources that are out there as possible to serve that individual, because no one is an island. No one program has it all. That's why braiding funds is so absolutely critical.
So just to wrap things up, if no one has one more question, to remind everybody, this recording will appear on the NAWB website, not website, on our YouTube page. Just search National Association of Workforce Boards on YouTube. The recording will appear there. We will be sending out the PowerPoint recording to everybody that registered for the event, and it will be appearing on Knob News that goes out tomorrow to all of our members. If you enjoyed this recording and you are not a member of Knob, please join Knob so we can continue to bring you this kind of programming. Thank you, Maria.
Thank
This
you,
was
Connie. Connie, this is
wonderful.
because of you. There's a minute left, and I got to thank you in that minute, because you approached me and said, "Can you do this?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, let me give you a hug. I've wanted to talk about this for so long." So yeah, this is great. Thank you, Connie.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And for all y'all that didn't know, I love this woman. I have known her forever.
I love Connie.
And so thank you guys for joining us. Hope you have a great rest of your week. And thanks, Maria.
God bless
Hope
you
to see
all.
you soon.
Okay,
Bye, y'all.
bye.